Our next guest of our dream team lineup, Mr. David Rowan, who is the editor-in-chief of the Wired magazine UK edition. A fantastic author, journalist. Well, you have a dream job, David.
I get to meet the crazy ones.
Yeah?
I travel a lot at the back of the aeroplane, very cheap seats, like 120, I think, last year, to meet the entrepreneurs pushing the world forward, trying to build the future, and to meet the investors betting on the future. And what I'm going to share now is the speed of change, the accelerating nature of what's happening in the network, and I guess how it changes the rules for business.
Okay, so you checked everything is okay?
Technology is a word you use when it doesn't work, but
okay.
This will work.
Great. Fire away.
Thank you. So, I edit a magazine which involves constantly being surprised about my own expectations about where technology has taken us. I thought I knew what drones were. I thought drones were like these 200-euro toys you take to the park, you take to the beach, you do photographs. In January at the Consumer Electronics Show, I had to revise my own assumptions because a Chinese company called Ahang starts showing a drone that takes you across the city.
We have the application designed for EHang 184. After setting up the flight plan with a single click, user can take off on any location, sit, relax, and enjoy the flight.
Yeah, I'm going to stick to my Rolls-Royce aeroplane engine, but this is the new reality. And this is not the future, you know, the drones delivering your goods. This is happening now. And just think 10 years ago, if we were talking about drones, it would have been a 10 million military machine. We've moved so quickly that now drone racing is a sport. This is the new sport. You have your virtual reality headset, you see what the drone sees. Drones are now replacing selfies. You need a droney. This is one of thousands of channels you can get on YouTube. This is a guy called Alex Chacon, travels around the world with his drone taking very high quality photos that he's smiling at. I think it must be very hard for Alex to get a girlfriend because she knows he's going to be paying all his attention up there. And that's just drones. Think of robotics. Think of artificial intelligence plus robotics. What is that going to mean for your life sometime soon? What is that going to mean the first time you are in that self-driving car? How is it going to challenge your own assumptions?
Oh my gosh, this is so... I'm not touching it at all, and it's driving. Whoa, the lanes are getting...
This is a Tesla that downloaded the software by itself overnight to turn it into an autonomous car. Think about robotics. This is a company called Boston Dynamics. Google bought this. They started doing military robots. They're now making robots for the warehouse. They spend a lot of time teasing their robots. But the sophistication in this, the computer vision, the sensitivity. I showed this last week. A woman in the audience said, "Ah, it's a robot!" But it's going to be in big ways, but also in small ways, changing our lives. This is a company that uses robots to do human handwriting. It's called Bond. If you don't want to write 100 thank you letters for the wedding presents, you just program the robot with your handwriting.
I am a highly sophisticated robot,
and it will do it
I
for
write
you.
letters for Bond.
And service robots are about to enter the norm, and it's not all quite ready for public use. There's a project in Singapore's university to try and replace your office PA, your receptionist, and this is their view of the future.
Hello.
Nice to see you.
What is your job?
I am a social companion. I can speak of emotions and I can recognize people. I recognize you're Nadia. Nice to meet you again today.
I think your receptionist is safe for another 2 or 3 years. But we have to change our assumptions. The idea of how you access the network, the idea of the interface. So it's no longer the mouse, it's no longer the keyboard, but maybe it's no longer the swipe on the screen. Maybe it's going to be directly from the brain. Here is a project called BrainGate. This lady is paralyzed. She's tetraplegic, can't move her arms or legs, but she has a chip directly implanted in her brain so she can tell the machine when she wants to move the robot arm. And she can drink. This is out of the Weiss Institute in Switzerland. And just think of, everywhere I'm looking, 3D printing. My assumptions, again, are being challenged. The astronaut on the space station needed a new wrench. It was emailed to him as an attachment and printed locally. These Chinese houses were 3D printed in 24 hours. You can now buy a low-cost 3D printer
can print files
that connects to your smartphone.
Your choice.
You design something on a screen,
Select your object, pour
it
in
connects
the
to
resin,
an app,
and Olo does the rest.
and the light from your smartphone turns the resin into something physical.
Olo uses a special photopolymeric resin. Olo prints are designed by using the light from the screen of your smartphone to harden the liquid resin layer by layer.
So, with all this transformation happening in every direction, the only certainty is the world is going to keep accelerating. And we have to think about what this means for consumer behavior, for business processes, and I guess the speed at which a new kind of business comes out of nowhere and challenges the rules that are allowing you to make profit. And we have to think about the exponential nature of Moore's law, which continues, which means something that used to be expensive suddenly goes free and changes the rules. Computer storage was expensive, is now pretty much free. But what happens if, let's say it's 1994, when it's $1,000 a gig? Let's say I'd proposed doing a business with you. Come and join my business giving away petabytes of computer storage. We'll call it Dropbox. We'll be billionaires. Then it would have made no sense. At a later stage, if you're at the right part of the curve, it makes sense. And this curve at which lots of things become essentially free is not just hitting computer processing, it's hitting genomics. This is the falling cost in a logarithmic scale of sequencing human DNA, actually falling much more quickly than Moore's law. And what was 15 years ago $100 million, one human's genome, is now a couple of $100. At some stage soon it will be the price of a cup of coffee. What does this mean for medicine? What does this mean for the state tracking the identities of its citizens? So you have to think in a different way, because there will be some new product coming from nowhere that will challenge the rules. 1983, a new gadget hits the market. Celebrity endorses it has. But let's say you are the big incumbent. You are the company with the most landlines in the world. You are AT&T, connecting millions of miles of copper cables to American homes and workplaces. Do you take this seriously, or do you ignore it? So AT&T, which even through its Bell Labs did a lot of the research that led to mobile telephony, didn't know. So they called in the consultants. They called in McKinsey and said, give us a good estimate of how many of these mobile telephone gadgets will be in use in America by the end of the 20th century in 17 years. McKinsey goes and does some number crunching and comes back with an answer. McKinsey says we think it could be quite significant. We think there could be almost 1 million mobile telephones in America by the year 2000, which wasn't a bad guess. It was slightly out. And there's 3 mistakes McKinsey made that I think we all need to think about when we're considering technology. First of all, Moore's law means it becomes more convenient, faster, before you actually realize it. Secondly, what determines if something catches on is not the technology, it's not the gigahertz, the megabits, it's whether it solves a human problem, whether it connects you to people, to things you love, whether it enhances your identity. And thirdly, McKinsey framed their thinking in a very fixed 1983 way. And social norms change. They change very quickly. In 1983, if you wanted to make a phone call, you would go and find the public call box. You would go back to the office. Today, if you take this away from a 15-year-old for more than 6 seconds, it's a human rights abuse. You will be sent to The Hague. So with all this happening, I'm going to give you 10 things I'm learning from the startups I'm seeing and the big companies that are responding that help me understand, I guess, the new rules of avoiding being disrupted and helping disrupt your own business. And the first one is about human behavior connected with these, which is you have to go where human behavior is. There's a slide that Mary Meeker, the analyst, put out a few months ago, which is the amount of hours American adults are spending with their digital devices each day. The green is the mobile, the blue is the laptop, desktop, the yellow is the other. From 2008 to last year. But the thing that you need to notice is we've gone from 2.7 hours a day on our screens to 5.6 hours a day. That's doubled. And that's time we are not spending talking to human beings. We are not in the meeting in the office. We are not with our children. We're not going for a walk. We are on this. And that changes things so radically that if you don't start every process your business works through using these sorts of devices, you're going to miss people's engagement. And it makes us irrational. Human behavior. I'm going to ask you about your own behavior. There was a question posted on the chat forum Reddit 2 years ago. If somebody from the 1950s suddenly appeared now, what would be the hardest thing to explain to them about modern life? And my favorite answer was, I have a device in my pocket capable of accessing the entirety of information known to man, and I use it to look at pictures of cats and get into arguments with strangers. And I think if you were honest, your own behavior has become very irrational because of these devices. We are now so addicted to our apps. There are apps just to tell you how many times a day you're checking your apps. There are new medical conditions. This is the 3-dot anxiety. And we have also had to redraw Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. But more interestingly, it's changing the way people are spending money in a very bizarre way. Kim Kardashian gives away a game 18 months ago, a free iPhone, a free Android game where you can live her life. You could pay little bits of money inside the game to move more quickly, but in 5 months, her free game earned her $43 million, which I think is a kind of bizarre, irrational thing, but that is the new norm. At the same time, with the network becoming smarter, you're going to have to incorporate aspects of artificial intelligence in what you're doing in order to stay competitive. And I guess I go to a lot of startup pitch events. Last year, every startup, no matter what it was building, had to include the phrase big data. We're a big data business. That stopped. This year, they're all a machine learning business or a deep learning business. So what is machine learning, deep learning? I guess it became mainstream when networks started recognizing pictures of cats, learning what was a cat and starting to recognize them. And it's everywhere we look. It's in the self-driving car. But what's really interesting is it's now democratizing. You don't need an academic department. There are now open source AI products. This one is called Neural Talk, which you can download. This guy is going for a walk in Amsterdam, and the machine is recognizing what it sees and putting the text at the top of the picture based on what it's seeing, which I think is just phenomenal. This is like a science fiction future that's here now, and any of us can start playing with it. So there's an entrepreneur in London I've got to know called Demis, who's very big in artificial intelligence. He's got a company called DeepMind, and his company, he's trying to solve general artificial intelligence, not just translation or recognizing pictures. This is thinking like a human. This is give the machine any stimulus and it will calculate what to do. Now, when you're building general AI, that's like a 30-year project if you can make it work. So Demis had no revenue, no products, but when I went to see him, he got very excited. He'd finally taught the machine how to play Space Invaders. He said the first hour, we just told it to try and get the highest score. We didn't tell it the rules. It kept dying. An hour later, it starts to learn when to hide, when to shoot. He said, but then we left it on all night. By the morning, it was the world's best ever Space Invader player. So this company that has no revenue and no products was then bought for quite a lot of money by Google. But they decided Space Invaders was just the start. They were going to go for this really complicated game called Go, which has many more permutations than chess.
No, it's a complicated.
So they beat the European champion. Then you may have seen a couple of weeks ago, they built the world champion. But what I'm really interested in is how all sorts of companies are using humans plus AI to solve problems in new ways. Here's a company I met in Portugal called Unbabel. They're trying to solve the translation problem. They're using AI to create any translation from one language to another, but then they're using a network of 40,000 verified translators through these devices, who then monitor, check, slightly improve little chunks of text. They have taken the cost per word of translating from about 30 cents to about 3 cents. That's solving. Or this company, using AI plus satellite imagery of shopping parking lots, they're able to monitor how busy a retail store is compared with last month, last year. They're selling the information to investors so they can short the company if it looks like they're going to report worse earnings that quarter. Or this company, Sentient, it's the biggest funded AI company in the world. It's using its AI partly to play the stock markets, partly to help retailers at the point of purchase work out how to optimize what people are buying, but also they're partnering with hospitals. If they take lots of patient data, in the first couple of minutes after surgery, they can monitor who is likely to develop sepsis. If you leave sepsis for an hour, you could die. I'm a journalist. It's even disrupting my business. This is a company called Narrative Science that's writing articles without humans. And we're at the stage now where the network is not just knowing what you're telling it, it's also starting to know what you're feeling, your emotions. This is a company that can read your emotions.
What if your devices could read your emotions and respond to them? Emotions is developing technology to do just that. Our industry-leading emotion-aware system will enable a revolution in device and application personalization. We're taking more pictures and videos than ever before. Imagine organizing this content by emotion, so your most memorable moments are easier to find.
Apple's just bought that company. I wonder what they're going to do with it. Although I have to tell you, my favorite use case of face recognition is this company called Churchix, which sells its services to American churches so they can tell who pretended to be in the congregation on Sunday but wasn't actually in church, which I think is genius. So the companies that are winning in this new connected world are those that design around friction. Don't put anything in the way of the human being getting access to what they want. There's a concept that designers talk about called the desire path, which is the path that human beings will take despite the journey you intend them to take. And if you think about it, there's a whole generation that is never ever going to do this because they are used to touching a button and magic happening. And the companies that are winning now are those that design simplicity into their products. If you think about when you come out of an Uber, what do you do to pay? You don't even need to touch the button. The system knows. When you sign up for an Uber account, you don't need to type in your credit card number. It's made it easier for you. You just photograph it. I travel a lot through cities I don't know. There are apps. City Mapper is a UK app. That they work out how to minimize the touch points. Because we're in a world now where people expect things to happen straight away, which explains the growth of companies that get physical things to you almost instantly. You know, eBay within 1 hour. This is one of the fast-growing companies out of London that gets things to where the person is, because we expect the physical world to be as instantly on tap as the digital world. And we're also about to get a whole bunch of companies trying to deliver things to you using robots of a different type. So this is a company called Starship Technologies, set up by some former Skype founders. They're going to be sending these around to your street, delivering what you want. I told the founder, have you ever been to the rough streets of South London? This is not going to last half an hour. But they're convinced that there's security inside them. So one of the other things that happens in a connected world is this idea of something being online, something else being offline becomes redundant. Offline is over. I have a friend who always carries an electric toothbrush with him, keeps it in his pocket, always traveling, always forgetting his toothbrush. He said, I have bought probably 100 of these Philips toothbrushes, but my relationship was always been with the retailer that sells it to me. Philips didn't know who I was, except recently, Philips has started using sensors to create the connected version of their Sonicare toothbrush. For the first time, Philips has the direct relationship with the customer. And that is going to be transformative in all sorts of contexts, because we're already giving lots of data to the network. We're just at the start. In the city, this is a wired view of where the city will be in the future. The taxi gets directions automatically based on your online schedule. The sandwich shop knows who you are, knows you like the chicken and avocado sandwich, starts to make it as you come near. Probably more important, the smartphone warns you of an ex-girlfriend or boyfriend ahead so you can cross the street. We're seeing a lot of startups using these sensors that have fallen right in price. This is one out of Munich, a startup called Bragi, that's making these in-ear headphones called the Dash that have about 50 sensors in them because smartphones have made the sensors almost free. And as well as the things that you would expect it to track, your movements, how fast you're going, they also have a little infrared light that points into the blood capillaries inside your ear. They say they can track your heartbeat, even your blood oxygen level. So everything that was offline is going to be connected. We have an internet of babies if you want to know the temperature of your baby. This is the smart diaper that can tell you on your mobile phone notification when your baby has urine that needs attention. This company, Sproutling, makes the ankle monitor for your baby. You put it on the ankle and it sends you messages. In the UK, this is what we do to convicted criminals, but apparently now it's responsible parenting. Which leads me to the mindset. I think just because these technologies are now ubiquitous and cheap doesn't mean we should all be allowed to just create products. We need to think about it first. This is what I call the internet of stupid things. There's a company called Quirky that was a crowd of inventors suggesting products, and they made the most popular products. It made this smart milk jar called the Milkmaid, that if your milk was starting to go sour, it would send you a notification, and I assume you would cancel your business meetings, you would dash home from wherever you were. Quirky, if you're obsessed with your eggs, also made the $50 smart egg tray, which sends you push notifications when you're running low. It may not surprise you, Quirky went out of business a couple of months ago. This is the internet of stupid things. And just because the tools are there and they're free doesn't mean people should be allowed to use them. Just because this Chinese hairdresser had access to a free online translation tool doesn't mean it should have been allowed to try and translate its name into English. So I talked about notifications. I think there's something very significant happening with messaging. It started in China, where apps, particularly WeChat, became the place inside the app people booked hospital appointments, they booked cinema tickets, they booked travel tickets. And the notification is now where the fight is for people's attention. And we're starting to get some very ambitious plays. Facebook is using Messenger as its app as a platform to try and get all sorts of other companies in there, including airlines. The idea that you check in on the app, you get human conversation threads going with the airline, you get your boarding card through the app, it tells you where your luggage is and stuff. They're adding AI. And I guess it's because all the attention is on the messaging notification. That's the screen space war on the smartphone, which is why every app now is trying to remake it as a messaging app. So Instagram is trying to be a messaging app. And messaging apps like Snapchat are so powerful, they're trying to be media companies. And the next step is little bits of AI code plus messaging, creating what's being called bots that answer your questions as if it's a human. This is H&M, the retailer. They're now experimenting on, this is an app called Kik. Ask it questions, it starts to know what you're thinking about. Some people at MIT a couple of weeks ago put out a bot onto Twitter to try and sound like Donald Trump. They took lots of Donald Trump phrases and they called it Deep Trump. And you may think this is nonsense, but to me it sounds actually more credible than Donald Trump. So every sector is facing transition. Think of energy. There's so much innovation happening in energy. This is a company out of Tel Aviv that's trying to solve the problem of your phone going dead before the evening. Nanotechnology, based batteries that charge in 40 seconds. This is a real-time demonstration of StoreDot. Elon, as well as cars and rockets, is reinventing his company as a battery company. They're building lots of batteries designed to take us off the grid if we want. Google, Facebook, all these big companies are now investing in energy companies like this one, or providing access to data from on high. So the rules of what is a utility, what is an energy company, you have to tear up those rules. Innovation is coming from the edges. So if you are any kind of successful company, you have to watch what's happening at the edges, because they essentially want to have your lunch. This is the homepage of one of the big bank websites, HSBC, as annotated by CB Insights for all the startups in Europe trying to take bits of the business, whether it's mortgage lending, business lending, money transfer. And everywhere I look, just take banking as one example, there's some very well-funded, creative people trying to take a bit of the profit away. Whether it's crowd-based investing, follow the investments of the people who are smartest. Whether it's currency transfer, this is a big billion-dollar company out of London. Whether it's peer-to-peer insurance. And I think what you've got to understand is the mindset of these startups. They don't care. They don't see the rules that successful companies see. One example, there's a bank that's come out of Germany. It's now in the UK. It's growing internationally. They have developer days. They invite developers in to start hacking around their system. They put their software code onto GitHub and said, hey, anybody out there, could you improve it? This is the boss, Matthias Kronor of Fidor Bank.
We want to be the pirates of banking. Welcome. You are the pirates of banking. There is a need for new banking. As the Web 2.0 development showed us, there is a potential for new banking. I would say this is kind of a typical high street banker. You know, steering his old, crappy bank through the wilderness and storm of this event.
So they're coming for the big companies. But also the customer is now much more powerful. We've reached one of these kind of classic Marxist revolution where power has moved from the hierarchy to the network. The individual, the boss, is no longer in charge. What happens when you create a network is power gets distributed, which is why companies like BlaBlaCar, a ride-sharing app, which couldn't get funding 5 or 6 years ago, let's just raise $200 million at a $1.6 billion valuation. It's why companies like Hilton, that took 93 years to get 650,000 rooms, are now much smaller than this company, which took 4 years to get 1 million rooms. They don't even have to change the sheets. That's why companies like these, everything from a games company to a dating company to a travel company, you can pay for their product with a new kind of currency owned by the crowd, which doesn't look like this because Bitcoin is a digital currency and it has nobody in charge, but it's starting to be transformative. At least the record of transactions called the blockchain is starting to be very significant. Reid Hoffman, one of the big investors who created LinkedIn, is a big investor now in blockchain businesses. And I asked him why. He said, well, blockchain creates a platform on which smart people can program all sorts of services that the existing banks never even thought of. It's the beginning of a whole new creative revolution like the App Store was. So we're moving from a world that was closed and limited to a world that's open. In the old world, if you wanted to make hardware, you would have needed a factory in Shenzhen. In the new world, like Eric, who had this idea for a smartwatch 2 years before Apple, Samsung were talking about smartwatches, he goes to Kickstarter, says, I've got this cool idea. Kickstarter invests $20 million in the last version of the Pebble Start watch. He gets access to other people's factories. He's got a real-time marketing channel. So with all this happening, technology is getting so good that we're even having to challenge our view of reality. I'm not going to get philosophical, but I think these sorts of devices and HoloLens and a whole bunch of others are going to be very transformative. And it leads me to what Neil Stephenson in his book Snow Crash in 1992 called the metaverse, which is a fake reality so compelling that a lot of people don't want to go back to the real reality. And it's not just going to be games. Obviously, this is going to be significant. It's going to be simulating all sorts of worlds. So there's a company called Magic Leap that's raised $4 billion, hasn't released a product yet. They've just released crazy videos like this. So it may involve miniature flying elephants. But what's really interesting is when it creates empathy. Chris Milk is a filmmaker in Los Angeles that's made these, imagine this is a 360-degree world. This is, you can be with the refugees from Syria in the Jordanian refugee camp. You feel like you're with them. It creates a sense of closeness. And we're already in a world where reality is faked anyway, you know, with easy-to-use software packages. This is one called Mocha that the film industry uses, but you could learn it in an hour. Change the color of somebody's eyes. Change their complexion. So finally, every business in a Darwinistic way needs to keep evolving if you're going to survive. And I'm going to give you some ideas from some of the companies that are evolving and some of the mindsets I'm seeing. So Tony Hsieh is an entrepreneur who sells shoes. His company in Las Vegas, bought by Amazon for $1 billion, called Zappos. And he is obsessed with creating innovation by what he calls enabling collisions, which is getting people with different mindsets just bumping into each other. So the atmosphere in the Zappos office is like a big party. Except Zappos is based in the very poor area of downtown Las Vegas, 30 kilometers from the casinos. And he's spending $350 million of his own money trying to create essentially a gigantic town square where collisions happen. He's investing in cool restaurants, in theaters, in nurseries, and he wants to create a place he says is the innovation center based on 3 C's. He wants a place where there's collisions, different kind of people meeting, co-learning, and connectedness. And this mindset is influenced, I think, a lot by Burning Man, the festival in the Nevada desert every August. For a week, people create a city. It's a non-cash economy, it's a gift economy, but it's about creative expression. And the whole of Silicon Valley goes there. And I don't think you would have Airbnb were it not for the thinking that comes out of the Burning Man mindset, where 2 people with different worldviews, different backgrounds collide, which explains why there's a growth in workspaces where people from different worlds come together. This is one I'm involved with in London called Second Home. You have your little pods, studios, but there's also common areas where you can have the venture capitalist meeting the hardware person. Incidentally, the next step we've just written about in our magazine this month is not just co-working, but co-living. There's a few places, not just in New York, but in London, where people are coming from different mindsets and actually living together. So another option is to outsource innovation. A big company like GE, huge industrial conglomerate, knows it can't do all the innovating itself, at least quickly. So it's partnered with a company that crowd designs cars, Local Motors. It's a maker company. And they've created a physical space, a big warehouse in St. Louis in America called First Build, where anybody can come and prototype new kinds of products much more cheaply, much more quickly than GE. But if it looks like it has promise, a new kind of freezer, a new air conditioner, the parent company will take the idea inside. Or you can distribute innovation to startups that stay independent. This is Lei Jun. He's often called the Steve Jobs of China. He runs a company called Xiaomi, which makes very high-end phones at a very cheap price. In fact, it's often called a clone of Apple because their stores also look the same. Except they've got a really clever innovation. They make no margin on the phones, on the tablets. Instead, they have invested in 60 startups, just small investments, $100,000. But they've told the startups, go and make the products you would normally make. Just fight for the death in that Darwinistic way, trying to understand what the customer wants today, not yesterday. But we will give you access to our supply chain. We will give you access to our 160 million customers, and we will put our logo on the side. In exchange, we want to take most of the margin. So the biggest air purifiers in China are made by the startups. The biggest phone rechargers are made by the startups, just with Xiaomi branding. And I said to the guy who runs this department, where the decisions are not made by investors, they're made by engineers. Which company should we invest in? Why don't you do this inside the company? And he said, well, we're an 8,000 person company at Xiaomi. If we were making all these accessories, we'd be 20,000 people. We'd be too slow to make decisions. Plus, these startups, they have to produce what the public want, otherwise they're dead. You could get your customers to innovate. Another Chinese company, OnePlus, that makes phones, has forums where people are improving the software or even suggesting new designs. This bamboo shell came out of the forums. Or get your own staff to think in a new innovative way. Let me take you to Atlanta in Georgia, where the headquarters of a big American fast food chicken company called Chick-fil-A, which is their advertising. Next to their main headquarters building, this is a fast food restaurant, they have an 8,000 square meter building where they encourage everybody to come in and play and innovate. They have these virtual reality goggles. They work on the science of standing in line. Another couple of examples. You're going to hear in a moment from Tom, who used to work for the government in the UK. It's a really good example of giving up power to people from outside. They brought in startup people, design people, started talking about government services like you talk about an app. And it was really interesting. It worked. They solved problems. They solved problems that traditional thinking wouldn't have solved.
The service is, it's a very quick transaction.
So this is about booking visits to jail.
Visit 24/7.
If you have a relative in jail,
from their home computer or their mobile phone.
The old system,
the only way that
you would have to go through a lot of paperwork. The new system, they came up with an app. It keeps families together. And I'm going to give you a couple more. First of all, challenge the established way of thinking. This is Hiroshi Mikitani, who runs a company in Japan called Rakuten. In Japan, it's very unusual for a company to make English its working language. So he's created a project called Englishnization, where he's forcing everybody to speak English, even in the Japanese office, because he says that will make us more globally attuned.
The world.
And finally, what I call reframing values. Work out where in a commodified world you can add value to the internet, maybe not in the way you thought. So who here would like to be running a physical bookshop in the most expensive part of London? So this bookshop has been there since 1930, and obviously it's a hard business. So it's decided maybe the value it has is not in selling books, but in curating books. They are now at Hayward Hill Books building personalized book collections for wealthy individuals. They recently did 3,000 books as a library for a gentleman in a Swiss mountain chalet. They charged him about 600,000 euros, which I think is a really good way of framing a business. This company makes HD cameras, but thousands of companies make HD cameras. Why is GoPro able to charge a huge premium? Because it's not a camera company. It's a company that helps you share the lifestyle you're living. It helps you share skiing into an avalanche. Don't try this at home. Finally, an insurance company that had a lot of these problems, people claiming for their damaged cars, and they hated making a claim. They'd lose their car for a couple of days, they'd cheat the insurer with fake scratches from last time. This insurance company in Australia, called Suncorp, decided to rethink. So they bought a chain of car repair shops. They created an app to make it really easy if your car got damaged. It would book it in the same afternoon. It would take care of the bills. Suddenly, for an insurance company, they're saving a lot of money. Customer satisfaction is rising. And my last example, this gentleman is Josh Kushner. In New York, made a lot of money out of startups in tech. Decided to create a health insurer, but do it as if it were a tech startup. It's called Oscar, and he talks about Oscar as if it's a tech company. He talks about user experience. So, broaden your mind about what your business really is. I edit a magazine, but clearly paper magazines are a challenging business. So we've reframed what we do. We're actually building a community of people who need to know where the future lies. So we make a lot of money out of conferences, sponsored dinners. We have a consulting business. Vogue magazine, also part of my company, Condé Nast, they're now involved in a college of fashion and design. Because that crazy future of flying cars is already here. Oh, this is a flying car, by the way. This is a startup out of Slovenia. If you didn't like the drone, you can now take your flying car. Now, I have to go to an airport to fly with a Rolls-Royce engine. But thank you for listening to me.